And welcome back to the Defence Property Podcast. Our usual co-host Liam Garman's not here today, but we've got a special guest with us today and we're going to do something a little bit different. So Mark Donaldson, welcome to the Defence Property Podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in Sydney. So I appreciate it very
Beautiful.
much.
And it's great to have you here. So I guess to kick off, for the soldier, sailor, airman that, they might newly enlisted or they might not be familiar with, give us a soldier's five on your defence, sort of who you are and what you've done.
My defence background, my defence experience, sure. If I go chronologically, joined 2003, I think it was.
Yep.
2002, sorry. Yeah, went through Kapuka, general enlistment.
Yep.
Always had a desire to go infantry and to be honest, my sole core purpose of joining was to go for special forces. So that's what I wanted to do. That's what I signed up for. And, like everyone else, you go to the recruitment office and you don't tell them that's what you want to do.
Yep.
Because you're going to sound a bit silly if you go in there and say, I want to go special forces. So I went in there and said, I just want to join the army. And these are the skills that I have, which was really good at being homeless, basically. And they said, you should go to the infantry. So,
nice.
And that's where they pointed me. So, I did everything I could then to understand what that meant, how to get in, get signed up, went through Kapuka to Singleton, up to Townsville, first real posting.
One or two back then?
One RAR back then. Yep. And did the obligatory sort of 15, 18 months minimum period that I had to do there, and then tried out for Special Forces selection in Perth to go to Special Air Service Regiment, which I was successful at. I always say they were short on numbers and they were looking for a lot of people that year anyway, mate. So I slipped in, but nice. I got through on numbers. But joined there and then pretty much saw the rest of my career out. Mostly at that point throughout that period from 2004. It would have been through to I think 2015. I left over there, 16.
Yep.
And then did a short period over here in Sydney with one commando regiment.
Yep.
Within that unit, although it was a Perth posting, and then took a reserve spot from there on and discharged.
Yeah, nice. And now living in the locals call it God's Country, I believe, the Shire.
Yeah, that's correct. Down in Cronulla area.
So
Sutherland.
Importantly, sharks or dragons?
Neither.
Oh
no, I'm a
different code.
Yeah, no, I'm NRL for sure.
Yeah.
I grew up being a Western Suburbs Magpie and the Fibros, and that was purely because my brother was a Manly fan who, Fibros versus Silvertails.
Okay.
When we were younger, so that was really where that came from. I don't think I really had any affiliation to the Western Suburbs whatsoever, but it was more because I just wanted to do the opposite of my brother.
Yeah, nice.
And,
as you do.
And then they become the West Tigers, and let's not talk about the last decade and a half, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're looking better this year.
They're doing all right this year.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. It's it's always one of those things you never know, right?
That's right. Yeah.
You don't want to three-peat on the wooden spoon, but we've done that, so let's move on and start winning.
We're a Cowboys household, so I'm happy to move on from the NRL topic. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. So going back a step, where did you grow up?
We moved around a lot when we were younger. So, born in Newcastle, we moved out to Sandy Hollow, which is on the sort of other side of Merriwa in the Hunter Valley. Then we moved into Denman, which is a little bit closer to Singleton.
Yep.
In the Hunter Valley still. And from there, when I was about 8, I think I was, my father got a job up in Dorrigo, north coast of New South Wales, about halfway between Coffs Harbour and Armidale on top of the plateau.
Yeah, okay.
We moved up there and I sort of stayed there till I was about 16 or 17.
Yep.
And then left home from there. So that was kind of the upbringing in the growing up area. When I was about 17, I moved down here to Sydney.
And then shortly after is when you joined?
I joined a little bit later. I didn't join until I was about 22.
Okay.
So I did some time pretending that I was going to try and be educated, which didn't work out.
Yep.
And then decided to go overseas, and I travelled overseas for a few years, learned a few skills, and that's when I decided to come back and join the military.
Cool. And I guess so we're a property podcast. A lot of the audience is sort of interested in that building wealth and property. But what was the topic of money like growing up in your household? Was there any exposure or conversation around it, or was it more of the silent, non-spoken?
Yeah, it wasn't really something that was spoken about. I mean, my father he worked in an abattoir, so as you can imagine, it wasn't a high wage back then.
Yeah.
My mother did, bits and pieces. So, wasn't. I guess the best way to describe it, money wasn't really something that was focused on heavily because it was more existing. And living from point to point, saving as best they could. They were pretty good at saving, but it was really about budgeting, make sure they had the finances for food, fuel, and I guess fun on top of that was really, car trips to see the cousins down in Sydney or Newcastle, or there was no overseas trips, there was no hotels, there was none of that.
It's very common, I guess, back in I think it's even common now, to be honest, but very common that I guess money's not spoken about. It's either it's the two extremes and there's nothing in between where it's not spoken about and it's it's just dad doesn't talk about it or mum doesn't talk about it and the kids are none the wiser and just grow up. Or I guess they are that very educational, but I think probably more of the silent topic. Yeah,
I think if I reflect, the only time I start to, and I thought about this before we came on, it's probably when I was in my early teens that it was around tax time.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first time I started to really, take notice of the conversations they would have around money of per annum versus how do we reduce the tax.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think it was in my second year of army. I was at trade school being a Rami, a little crafty, and someone goes, "Oh, you got to do a tax return." I'm like, "What's that?" And they said, "I'll just go see this guy in town," and I did 2 years in the one time because I hadn't done the year before because I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But we caught up a few weeks ago and just had a quick chat before when we were talking about doing this, and we sort of spoke about, I guess, kind of like the desire or the interest in building a property portfolio or getting into property, years ago. But you sort of mentioned that missed opportunity or talk us through when you sort of first thought about it and looking back in hindsight in that.
Yeah, definitely. So it was right around that period, I would say 2 or 3 years before I joined or before I went overseas and, had all that fun and then joined the military. And I was very lucky to have jagged a job with a telecommunications company that were laying optical fibre between Sydney and Melbourne, around the country, but the prime contract was Sydney to Melbourne. I was probably 19 years old, I think, and I was earning pretty good money back then. For a 19-year-old. It was, with travel and entitlements, with a bit of T&E and then wage on top of that. I think I was, if I remember correctly, it was around, 2.5 to 3 a fortnight. Okay.
Yeah, wow.
Pretty good back then.
Back then, yeah.
Right, that's pretty good back then. And so I had aspirations of, hey, maybe I should go and buy a house with this.
Do something with
property.
it,
do something with it. Instead, I bought cars and, traveled overseas. So, but I did put a little bit aside. The one thing I always used to try and do was, I don't know where it came from. I don't know why. I don't remember anyone telling me this. Although I did work with some guys in the in that telecommunications company that used to tell me about that I should bury cash in the backyard.
Yeah, right.
I'm not quite sure what their background was, but I didn't take that as the best advice. I always thought it was better in the bank, but I'm not really sure what they were up to. But the one thing I did used to do was never really try and max it down to zero.
Yeah,
I tried to never live like that. So on reflection, I wish I had bought property back then.
Yeah,
and used it for those types of investments.
So fairly conservative.
Pretty conservative, I guess.
It's interesting, I guess, how many trips do you do to the Middle East and stuff, a good handful or?
Yeah, well, I did 7 to Afghanistan. So.
Yeah, okay, well, there you go. And it's funny, you take a very risk-adverse approach in considering money and overspending and overstretching, which many people are. It's very common. But then you go and you spend a lot of your life going to the most, riskiest part of the world. It's just interesting to draw on.
It's a different mindset, I think, because
100%.
Yeah, there's that personal risk versus or another way to think about it, I believe, is there's risk to life, which is life and death, but then there's risk to livelihood, and I think
you have to live through one.
You have to live through one, exactly right. The other one is you're not gonna see the effects and the sorrow and the bad parts that follow on.
Yes,
it's you.
Yeah,
and so I think that. It doesn't lessen the risk. It heightens the risk profile, but for the consequences. But to your point, you have to live through one.
Yeah,
So it's I think psychologically it's a different mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just circling back to that, the comment about bearing money, like I did a short stint myself working at a bullion dealer, right? So buying and selling gold and silver over the counter. And, you know, there was that, the very typical clientele would often be someone that would probably bury cash out the back. So it's interesting. But looking at a lot, and we have the conversation around opportunity cost with clients quite often. And you go back to, say, 1970, and the average house price in Australia was $12,000. You know, and a kilo of gold was about 1,600, I think, from memory, or around that. So if you had 7 kilos, you got about $12,000, you know, to get those 7. And then you can take $12,000 worth of cash and just park it on the table here with the gold and with the, you know, the title of the property. Fast forward to today, and, you know, the average house price, all capitals Australia-wise, about $1 million. A kilo of gold, I think last I checked, was about 150,000. So 7 kilos is pretty close to that million.
Yep.
And then you still got 12 grand worth of cash.
Yep.
You know, so that's the conversation we have with clients, is that store of value. I think there's a very common saying that cash is king, but that's probably cash is king for transacting when you want to exchange. But that Robert Kiyosaki said, cash is trash, you know, especially when it's that store of value or wealth. And that's the sort of education piece, I guess, we go through with some people.
I mean, look, it makes sense. You know, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
A lot of my investment decisions, you know, if I look back, is I should have, or I wish I had, or I wish someone, and maybe we're going to get into this, but I wish someone had, you know, broken through into my mind, particularly when I got into the military.
Yeah.
Particularly when I got into the military, because there was the ability to understand and stretch, knowing that you had a full-time job or you had security in that job to a degree.
That was the time to do it.
That was the time to do it. That's right.
Yeah. Interesting. So property-wise, you've let's just talk through it. Like, you've got your home in the Shire.
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
And how long you had that?
It's whatever that is, 3, 5, 8 years.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. House.
Yeah, house. 5, depending on how you configure it, 4 or 5 bedroom house.
Yep.
2 lounge rooms.
So it's fairly standard for the house of the Shire. Put in. Yep. Do you mind sharing numbers on what you paid and what it's worth now? Ballpark it.
Yeah, ballpark. I brought it the height of, you know, back then, I guess what was that bit of a property boom around that sort of 2015 onwards. So we paid roughly around 1.3.
Yep.
Got into large amounts of debt to do that. I think last evaluation, you know, on average, I think that area's it's somewhere between 1.8 to 2 now.
Sounds about right. Well, the median, I was looking the other day, the median for the Shire as a whole is about 1.8, 1.89 or so, or thereabouts.
Yeah.
I think units were about 1.3, so sitting there. Cool. And then you've got a block of land. Is that a bit more of a hobby than the investment, or?
Yeah, no, I have a block of land as well that we can escape to or get away to, and trying to slowly improve that. More of a hobby, you know, I guess getaway type of investment. But however, it's also, you know, it's one of those things that just trying to improve the land as well. And so, you know, make some improvements to it, you know, to try and create that value out of it as well.
Yeah. And you borrow to buy it?
Yeah, we did. Yep. We did have to borrow to buy that as well. So
the example I love giving, or the reason for that question, is in that example of the, you know, the gold, the title, the property, and the cash. You're kind of borrowing the cash, which is losing its value in that example, and it's losing its store of value. So it's not. So you're buying or borrowing a deteriorating asset, cash, to buy the property that's that store of value and hedge. So for the people that are listening, borrowing in the right context is debt is good to build that wealth and get that leverage, but in a controlled environment, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah. So I'd imagine there's a bit of equity across the 2 properties, and there's potentially, without going, into the in-depth numbers of the portfolio, what would you say is your appetite for, like, building a portfolio and it, looking at hindsight and now and Yeah,
right. So if I start with, if I think about it logically, maybe it's better to start in hindsight and then move forward.
Yep.
Yeah, hindsight's perfect. But my appetite back then was probably not very high. However, comma, as they say, if I was to tell anyone, in the military now or in that sort of similar situation, take a risk to do that now.
Yep.
It will pay off in the long run.
Yep.
It will pay off in the long run. It seems very, very risky, or it seems potentially sometimes for me it was like, hey, this will tie me down. I'll be forced to be locked in to a certain thing to pay this off. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think that mindset too sometimes is, I don't want to be tied down to looking after this thing or managing this thing, this asset. But you got to think about it now as an asset. It's there to be utilised in the future.
Yeah.
And I think probably if I had any advice, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but if I had any advice for those junior members in the military, regardless of service or rank, I guess at any stage really, but certainly at that junior level is if you want to have freedom in the future, and that's freedom of choice, and make good choices now.
Yeah.
And I think that's really a valuable thing to think about at that moment in time, or where they're at now is, you put yourself in those positions, where you might have to pay it off. To your point, you have to store a value.
Yeah.
However, it will pay off in the long run. If you still want to be running around in a green uniform when you're 55, 60, keep going to the casino.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And keep blowing your weekly paycheck. But
100%. Yeah. I think I look back, I bought my first property when I was 22, and I was walking through Stocklands in Townsville, for anyone that knows that. And I was with a friend, and he goes, come on, let's go to this bookstore. So what are you doing that for? Like, we're probably hungover, I don't know, but let's presume that we were. Probability says we were. And we went to this bookstore and I picked up this book. It was Steve McKnight's 0 to 135 in 3.5 years or something like that. And I just picked this property book up, brought it and, read it. And I was never much of a reader. I was, more of a challenged youth and didn't like reading books and going to school so much. And it was probably the only book in my life at that point that I read from cover to cover really quick. And, I had a motorbike loan, so I paid that down fairly quick over a few months or whatnot, and then just ran out, went and saw a broker and bought a property and no idea what I was doing and that, and pretty much made every mistake you can under the sun in that property purchase, and then kept consuming and building. But I guess the thing that makes me so passionate is giving the young person that light bulb moment of starting, younger and sooner, I guess, because time is the one asset we can't get back, and time does all the heavy lifting if done right with property.
Yeah, definitely for sure. If going further back, not just in my military time, but if I went into hindsight even further, we had the family property up in Dorrigo, which was a little 5-acre block, but it had a new house, or at the time a new house on it. My mother and father borrowed and saved rather heavily to purchase that block of land. We'd always rented up to that point.
Yeah.
I can't remember ever, actually owning. We were ever in our own home up until that point of ownership. And I had some tragic events that happened to my mother and father. They were both missing and deceased. So myself and my brother, I have one older brother, we took inheritance of that property. I think I was 19. Yeah, I was 19. He was 21. And so, young kids, we get 5 acres with a 4-bedroom house, double garage, elevated place, beautiful, in a beautiful place in the country that at the time was, probably worth, I think, about 180 grand.
Yeah. And what year roughly is this?
So it would have been around 1998.
98,
So,
okay, yeah.
I think we sold it. I think we hung on to it for about 2 years, and then we sold it.
Around 2000.
About 2000 for about 180.
Wow.
And I look back at that now and think, well, that's $1 million property, right?
Oh, and the rest probably.
And the rest.
Yeah.
Noting the way that place has boomed and back
to 2003, 4 through to 2008 would have been a decent boom back then.
Yep.
It was kind of what we went through post-COVID, like a national boom almost. And then, so you would have got at least a double there and probably,
Again.
Yeah, again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially after COVID.
Yeah.
So, you said recently you're up that area and you probably had a look around. I'm guessing.
Yeah,
it's kept an eye on it. You know, there's some interesting prices.
Yeah, definitely.
Area.
Yeah, it's a very actually I remember one a good mate of mine. He's over in Perth at the moment. He's been on the podcast. I think it was episode number 2. So anyone that heard it, he discharged from the army. He did one trip to Afghanistan with 5AV, come back, did his I think 6 years and got out, and he drove from Townsville to Perth, a bit of a holiday once discharging, and he went through Byron Bay as you do. And fell in love with it and got to Perth, started his job in the mines, and he's flicking through. He brought 100 acres in Brunswick Heads.
Yeah, wow.
And it ran parallel to the highway.
What year was this?
2008.
Yeah, okay.
I think. Yeah. And if I remember the numbers from the episode, I think he paid about $1 million or $1.50 million or something. It's, he's subdivided, or it was 2 titles, moved a boundary, sold the low-lying 70 acres, retain the 30 that sort of look at the lighthouse. Like if I think in the episode putting a number on it, it's hard to value because it's 30 acres. Like I think it's like 8-10 mil plus.
Yeah,
he just cleaned up, like doing so well. So and we actually brought a property. He come to us and we brought a property with him over in WA and that. So. Yeah, some people, I guess, get it right, or there was no assessment, there was no investment. It was just like I literally drove through here in the right year.
Yep.
He lived under a tree in a tent while he built this big shed, like he did, and did FIFO from it to WA to the mines.
Right.
He took a chance. He borrowed $1 million when he was, I don't know how old he was, but in late 20s maybe, and that was a lot of money back then for his age.
Absolutely.
But it can work, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, you look back at those opportunities and you say, what if? But, I guess that's the beauty of your listeners and the people that are interested in this thing, and that maybe there's something in the back of their mind that says, I want to do something with my life as well as, and if it is primarily military people, I think you're in a really good position to make those decisions now, especially when you're younger. Yeah,
the job security is obviously
and the buying power.
Yeah,
and that's right.
And so I guess there would be quite a few people out there that are in a similar position to you, give or take. Everyone's, but they might have their own home with some equity there. We might call it, if they've had it for, at least 5 years, they're probably sitting on a good amount of equity if they are. So are you open to maybe looking at what we'll draw some assumptions. We don't have to go into real numbers and say what that might look like to build out a portfolio.
Yeah, look,
strategize it.
Yeah, sounds great.
If we can inspire one person to get on the ladder. So what are the assumptions I've made, I guess, across the 2 properties, you're going to have like $1 million to 1.5 in equity. I think the outcome is not really going to matter if it's either, and it could be higher or lower, but there's a bit of equity there that we can use to get started. And again, without diving into income, because everyone that listens is going to be different as well, but let's just say that you go to the bank and they can say you can borrow 1.5 million. So in today's prices, it's probably not huge, but it's decent to get started.
Sounds great.
And we rely on, so in Australia, over 20, 30, 40 years, the longer we look at it, probably averages out 6.87%. So we'll use 7% as our growth metric on each one. So let's say in year 1, so we've pulled out our 1.5 or 1 in equity, and we're going to chop that up and use it as deposits to then go to a different bank and say, hey, I want to get a loan for a property at 80%. In year 1, we pull it out. We buy 2 properties, so we're $750 each. And we're going to use 20% deposit on those and about $50K in purchasing costs to cover stamp duty and stuff. But we're going to park them in a trust, and we're going to buy them in a trust. And then year 2, we buy our 3rd property at $750, and that's going to be so the first 2 we hit 1.5 million if anyone noticed, and the second year we're going back for another 750. That's the reason why we put the first 2 in the trust. Then we're going to use a investment savvy broker, and once we buy a property in a trust, there's a bit of preserved borrowing capacity, or some people call it endless, but let's say preserved borrowing capacity strategy where we can maximise how much we can squeeze out of the banks. So year 2, we buy a third property for 750. Year 3, we do the same, and year 4, we do the same. So year 4, we've purchased the 5th property at the start of the 4th year. So we had 24 months worth of growth, and then we've basically waited the 5 years, or the last 2 years out with no more activity, and we're at 5-year mark. So total purchase, 5 properties, 750K each, just for round numbers. We've committed 3.750, and we've got debt of about 4 million on those 3.75 because we borrowed stamp duty and pulled the equity in that. So an acquisition cost. At the end of the 5 years, using just a standard compound interest calculator, because we've layered in, the first 2 properties are now 2.176 using 7%, right? Because they had the full 5 years to grow. We had property number 3 is at 991 because they had 4 years. And then property number 4, 924, okay? And property number 5, which had 24 months growth because it was at the beginning of year 4, was 862. So all up, we got our 5 properties, adding that all up, 4.867 million with 4 million of debt. So we're in a net position of 867.
How does that sound?
Sounds pretty good, right? And I'll go back to a friend, Andre, that if he's listening, and that we purchased for him and that's using 7%. So we purchased with this one gentleman 865 in August 23, without coming to me or telling me. He went directly to the bank to refinance, I think it was, and the bank valued it at $1.50. 7 months later, it was 190K. Because we picked the right market, I guess. Yep. If we look at Townsville over the last 12 months, it's done 31%, I think, in a rolling 12 months. So, and we're using 7% here, so we can probably front load some growth on this as well. But if we were to hold those for another 5 years.
So we're at 10 years now?
Yeah, so we're at 10 years. And just using the 7%, compounding, we're at 6.899 million with our 4 million worth of debt. So we're net 2.899 million, just in a 10-year period.
Yep.
And then at 10 years, I won't say the world's your oyster, but, you can go see your financial planner, sell the lot, park the 2.9 million in super or ETFs, or, you can sell some and just keep the white meat. But hopefully that story there, can
sign me up. When are we signing up?
Sign you up. The risk is gone. No.
Well, what is the risk to that?
Well, you're layering it as well. So I guess, the risk is a change in circumstances, the biggest. You're not intending on having kids and you knock your missus up and you have triplets. That's a big change in lifestyle and expenses. Change of employment. You've got to know, I guess, like we were saying before, that defence is quite secure. But if you're not in defence and you do it, like how secure is your job? What stage of your life in? Obviously, if you're 20 years old, doing something like that, 20 years old, you're probably unlikely to have your own occupier in the equity, but you've got time to recover. Whereas if you try tackling that at 50, 55, you might not have the time. You could pick the wrong market, the wrong asset. So there are risks, but there's ways to navigate it, I guess. So hopefully that's inspired a few people out there to
I hope so too, because it's when I hear that, the logic makes sense. The logic makes sense when you hear it like that, and that'll fluctuate, right?
100%, and nothing grows at a perfect straight line.
That's right.
Of 7%. But you can sort of pick your markets, and that's what we do: is use a lot of data on the markets. There's so much out there at the moment, and we start with high confidence data. So we're not looking at country towns or mining towns. We want consistent data without high variance, so it's reliable. We look at the affordability index, so that's like the median household price and the median household income, and how affordable is it for people to buy there. If it's highly unaffordable, it's unlikely that the masses will come to buy and drive prices up. And then we can look at supply and demand metrics. So we want to pick a low stock environment. So the percentage of properties in any one suburb that's on the market, we want to pick the lowest we can, and low building approvals. That's critical because that's additional and new supply. And that's a high percentage. And that's where a lot of these property groups that target, they're flogging house and land packages and townhouses off the plan, banking undisclosed commissions and stuff. But really, like, that's going to be a huge cap or slowdown of your growth because it's incoming a new supplier.
Yep.
So we navigate all those markets and look for them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then, we just sort of go through that due diligence suite, I guess, and flood map, bushfire map, housing commission checks, main roads, roundabouts, power line, cemetery, substation, all these detractors. And so we're removing risk from the property because if you look at that, a family with 3 kids, they don't fit in the 3-bedder. So they want a 4-bedder house. The market's hot where they're looking. They pay $50,000 too much, but they get in the market because they're frustrated. 20, 30, 40 years time down the track, they want to retire, medical emergency, get out of the market. But the days on market for that suburb's gone from 20 when they brought it to 70 or 90, and it's taken 90 days for the good ones to sell. They're not going to be able to sell their white elephant if they brought it on a main road. So doing the due diligence is sort of our insurance policy on those properties that we're buying as we build the position.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so we can mitigate risk along the way.
Yeah. It's a strong story. It's a strong argument. It's,
and there's plenty of people that have done it, and it can be done.
You're not the first taking the risk. Right?
No, that's right. You don't have to recreate the wheel. It's just taking action, I guess, and getting in and doing it.
It's interesting. I worked with a guy. I won't name names, and we always used to look at him and say, "How have you done that?" And he had a portfolio very, very similar to that, probably a little bit more.
Yep.
By making very, very similar decisions by the way you just described. On paper, he was probably able to retire much earlier throughout his career.
Yeah.
Which gave him, I think, a security within his job to enjoy his job.
It's pretty powerful when you're there because you want to be.
Exactly. And then I think it comes back to that point of he got to a stage of his career where he had a freedom of choice.
Yeah.
I can stay and continue enjoying do what I do in this role, which is serving the country, or he could get out and go and find another role.
Yeah.
But because of the position he'd put himself in, he was able to make those decisions.
But I would love to hear his thoughts on what was it like in the early days.
Of course.
Because you don't get the joy of that freedom and decision without doing the hard graft.
Yep.
And I'm not going to sit here and say it's all beer and skittles building a portfolio because it is a slog, and you got to, and it can feel slow and a grind, but you got to go through those early years to get to those later years, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
So looking back, I guess 3, 5, 10 tips, what would you say to, I guess let's start with the current serving, all things considered, just life, hindsight, some tips for the young soldier, sailor, airman.
Yeah, well, I think before I get into that, I did make some property purchases when I was a little bit younger. So when I did actually go over to Perth, I did buy a house.
Yep.
I did get into the property market. I then upscaled, moved closer into the jewel of the area, I guess you would say, or the pearl of the area.
Yep.
So just slowly
owner occupiers.
Owner occupiers. Yep. Hit a bit of tragedy where that one, I'd moved out to that point into a rental.
Yep.
For certain circumstances, and unfortunately, that owner occupier was then an asset, I guess.
Yeah.
To a degree, burnt down. And so,
really? While you owned it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
right. So we had to go through that process of, because it was a unique property as well. It was heritage listed.
Right.
The value of the land versus the value of rebuilding under certain heritage list conditions at the time didn't really quite stack up. And so, it was quite difficult to build to a heritage listed.
Yeah, wow.
Standard.
So did you have insurance?
We did.
But it didn't cover the cost of the bill because, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we sold the land, so we made a loss on that one.
Yeah, wow.
Versus the value of it was if it was intact.
So I'd imagine what happens there when it's insured but you don't go through with the bill, do you get, did insurance pay out at all or did it because you chose not to build?
Because we chose not to build, to be honest, I don't remember exactly how that one went down. But it was a little while ago.
Yeah.
But essentially we sold what was left of the block. So,
yeah, okay. What suburb, if you don't mind sharing?
We were in East Fremantle at the time.
Yeah, nice.
So,
lovely.
It was a good spot.
Yeah,
It was a really good spot.
yeah. I lived there for 2 years in Perth. It's a cracking spot.
Yeah, it is a great spot. And it was in a good location too, really central to everything.
Yeah.
really lovely little cottage. But, lessons learned, right? And you never know that to your point, like what are the risks? You never know a house is going to burn down. So insurance is super important. So if I think about a tip, for those in the military is insure properly. Yeah. If you are going to go into these investments, and make sure you're covered correctly and finding good people such as yourself to help guide them through that process.
Well, a lot of risk in life, not just property investing, but I'm like overseas, you would have managed risk like all day, every day. Like it's just managing and knowing how to. And if you don't, like it's where can I get that advice, or how do I mitigate this?
Exactly, and if we're talking to military people or veterans and defence, you really haven't got there's not many other jobs out there that you're in currently right now that manage risk.
Yes.
Probably the best they possibly can.
Yeah.
There's not only is there processes through your planning process, and if you're a soldier, sailor, airman, and you're right down the bottom and you just show up and do your job, like I get it.
Yeah.
I've lived it. But inquire about those processes because, I'm pretty sure there's people out there who have gone on missions or exercises, and you might be deployed and you'll get orders. And within those orders is things called actions on.
Yes.
They're mitigators for the risk.
Yeah.
So if you apply that logic to what you're doing, I think out there in what you're talking about in the world, right? Those you have great training.
Yeah.
You have great experience in doing those things already. You've just got to apply that context to this different environment.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a good way to look at it and frame it like actions on an event and what do I do here? And if you don't have that, I guess that solution or that idea of what you're going to do in said scenario, who do I go to and ask?
Who do I go to and ask? But even for, if I looked at it a more holistic or across that ecosystem, and maybe that middle management level, be it enlisted or for officers, a range, for example, is a great example to do that. There is safety rules, there is mitigators, there's all these things you put in place, and you have a checklist and you mark them off to ensure that that activity you're about to undertake is as safe in this situation or as risk-free as it can possibly be in the context of what it is you're trying to achieve. And so
100%.
Again, that training you've received that applies in that military context, I think it's about spinning that, realising you are highly skilled in those types of things, and you can apply to a situation such as this. It's about having that comfort to make those decisions, and exercising those as you would in the military, practicing those. So you get used to making those risky decisions, I guess.
Yeah. So I think when we were speaking the other week, you mentioned, so you did use a buyer's agent with one of the properties that how was that experience and what property was that for?
Yeah. We didn't get to the tips, but that's all right. Maybe
we'll come back.
Covered it, but it was interesting because we're in that market in Sydney at the time where it was really difficult
to get in. Yeah.
It was really difficult to get in. And every auction you would go to, it was blowing out, 200K plus.
Yeah.
Above probably what it should have been.
Yeah.
If not more in some instances. And so it became a cost time benefit for us.
Yep.
Every weekend was spent trawling houses. Every weekend was spent at auctions. Every weekend was spent at missing out.
Yeah.
The frustration of that. And it got to a point was we didn't know the area that well. We knew it well enough that we wanted to move there. We knew it well enough that it was a good decision for the family.
Yeah.
And financially it was a good decision, but we didn't know it well enough to know
how to go about
that and executing into that. To your point, go and find someone who does.
Yeah.
So we engaged a buyer's agent. I won't name names, but very, very, very helpful for us in that sense.
Yeah. Yep.
It was an expense.
Yep.
But I think it was an expense. That was well worth it.
Yep.
The one thing I would say about that is, if you have your idea of what it is you want, and I don't say this based on bad experiences or good experiences, but try and stick to that as close as possible.
Yeah.
Try not to compromise just to get into that market, unless you're willing to look at that as an investment.
Yep.
And not a forever home. So to speak.
How long were you looking for by yourselves before you engaged a buyer's agent?
I would roughly range of magnitude probably 12 to 18 months.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And this is that opportunity cost, and this is sort of what I think I mentioned earlier. We do have that opportunity cost conversation with clients where doing it yourself, let's say 12 months, $1 million purchase price. Mm-hmm. I'd imagine if you're missing out on auctions like that, the market would be at least 1% a month. Like we look at live data for every suburb we buy in, and
It was.
a lot of the hot markets are 1 to 1.5, even 2% a month. You know, $1 million purchase price, 1% a month, 12%, that's 120 grand over 12 months, you know, and people balk at sometimes engaging help. But I guess you don't see the on paper opportunity cost of that 120 grand of growth that you've missed out on. But you see, people do see the fee. But
so I had a classic example, right? My wife said this place is great. Went and had a look at it. It was great. It was really good, you know. I was looking at it going, yeah, but if it floods like that, the shed's going to get full of water. And yeah, the backyard's got a rock in it. And you know, you try and find the bad things rather than looking at it and going, okay, where is the value here? Yeah, especially, and it's one of those things, try and reduce that emotion, right? And then I was looking at the emotional sort of side of it. You know, got into myself and one other buyer at the auction, wasn't 100% convinced in myself and with conviction that, you know, this is the risk I should take for the family. You know, missed out by probably 10 grand, right? Like I reckon we were going for it. I had that ability to push that and take that risk, but I didn't. And
how early in the piece of the 12 month?
Pretty early. And you know, that thing grew in that particular suburb
over that 12, 18 months. 100% it would.
To a point where I couldn't have afforded it.
Yeah, okay.
And you know, you look back at those things and go, well, to your point, there's 10 grand on the table. Now it's great to look at it, but 10 grand at the table, like, was it really worth it for that? Yeah. You know, that you could have made that, you know, over a shorter period of time, where you would have made that back within probably 2 months after purchasing it.
And just circling back to the comment about flood, like risk, and you know, you've assessed it and you're like identified it, and you're like, okay, could be a thing here.
That was in my professional opinion.
That was the question. Expert. So we didn't go on the council and look at the flood mapping or anything. We just assumed and erred on the side of caution.
It had a hill, so it must flood, right?
Well, very good. So I guess as we wind it up and get near the end, any final tips, I guess, that we haven't sort of covered that you would throw out to the listening audience?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll probably double down and amplify on some of the things I've already said, and try and be concise in some of the others. But ultimately, right, is think about what you want in the future. Yeah. You know, really hard to do when you're 22. I just want to join the military, jump on a boat, go and get a bunch of tattoos in different ports around the world and have a great time. Or I don't know if they do that anymore.
Sounds good anyway.
Right. I want to go and have some good times. I want to meet some great people and have a good career and serve my country. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Unfortunately, one day you might wake up 25 years later and, you know, you could be chief of the army, or you could be a regimental sergeant major and, you know, you've done quite well, but, you know, what does that next phase look like? Yeah. And if you haven't made those decisions, I think along the way that will set you up for that outside of, you know, super and squirreling things away, you could be in a much better position.
That's right. And just because you've done well, like, you could do better as well.
You could do better. That's right. Yeah. And so I guess, you know, think about those things early. Seek out people who have done it before and learn from them, or find people that will help you on that journey, as you do with everything. In the military career, is if you don't know the answer, you go and find someone who does. Yeah. Yep. And you know, think about those things that is beyond service. Yep. Because, you know, you might not think about it at that time. It's all about service. You know, I show up, I do my job, and especially in certain roles, you live that lifestyle. Yeah. Is at some point that will end. Yeah. And what do you want that to look like? Do you want that to be freedom of choice? Again, if I double down on that, is I have a friend who's I won't go too far into his position, but, you know, let's say he just cracked about 51 years of age. He has the freedom of choice because of those decisions that he made, similar to what you outlined.
But a bit if we go back to him and ask, hey, what was your, I don't know, let's say 20 years he did.
Really difficult, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I bet he still enjoyed his service.
Yeah, definitely.
He still got good stories to tell. He still had a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, friends. I did. And I got on the property piece early. So I was always having a mortgage and managing, you know, but I still went out with the boys and still had, you know, my fair share of fun.
Yeah, so I think about that context too, right? As a hint or a tip is, you know, you can still have fun.
Yeah.
Right? You can still have fun even though you might have a mortgage. It probably helps you make decisions better anyway in your day-to-day job. You know, because you're not living on the edge of, you know, all or nothing.
Yeah.
So you know, that's the other way to think about it is, you know, do you want to continue to throw it all away?
Yeah.
And really end up with nothing at the end of all?
Yeah.
Or actually make some, you know, decent decisions and put yourself in a position to be better off later on.
And I guess like if I could jump in like that, I've been in a position where I've had a property that I purchased and it didn't move $1 in 15 years, but that was like the first one I purchased. And yeah, but I didn't know what I was doing. I just ran out and purchased. Like number one mistake I feel in property is buying where you live as an investment because that's where I can see it and touch it. But I've also had property that's doubled in 4 years. And I guess somewhere from the very beginning to today, somewhere in the middle where like when life throws problems at you, because it will, you know, like people pass away, careers change, things happen. When you can sell one, which we did at one point, sold one, parked a heap of money in the bank, it solved a lot of the problems that we were going through at that point in time.
Yep.
So the taking the risk helps you mitigate things later as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. I think, some other hints and tips in this particular instance is to that point, right, is don't look, if you are going to go and do it, like you do want to go and buy a property, and you kind of took the words out of my mouth, but don't go and buy the place that you think is going to be, you know, at that time of your career, especially early in your career, as you said, like don't go, hey, I'd really love to have a house on the Gold Coast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, go and buy a house on the Gold Coast for
strategize it.
Strategize it, that's right. Go and strategize it as you would anything else in the military and use those skills, those soft skills that you've got from the military.
I think there's a big one that you touched on, strategizing, because they've got DOHAS, HPAS, Hep C to use. You know, when you look at just the entitlements by themselves, there's quite a bit of strategy. Then you overlay that with Perth market, Adelaide market, and assessing Australia-wide of where these markets are in their cycles. And then overlay it with we live our lives 2 to 3 years at a time, depending on your core and your service. But like you're posting around, there's a fair bit of strategy, I guess, that can go into it that can make or break your results, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe one to finish up on would be create clarity for yourself. And you kind of touched on it there is 4 or 5 different options to go and get money and borrow. You know, the paperwork and the amount of grind you have to do. And I've experienced it is to get these different types of loans and to strategize and create all this positioning to be able to maximize your potential in the position you're in. You know, reflect on when you join the military.
Yeah.
Right? And think about, how keen you were to join, but secondly, how hard you the effort you put in to get in there. Now, whether that was through whatever stage it was, that might have been joining general entry, it might have been in the officer school, might have been in your IETs. You know, I'm sure there was difficult times for yourself when you went through RAME and you're like, I really just don't get this, or I'm really struggling. Maybe you were jet, I don't know. But I'm sure there was a part where, you know, throughout your career into the military, it was difficult.
Yeah.
You know, and you didn't understand things and there was a bit of an effort to be put in, but now it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, so again, I think reflecting on that and thinking about it in that way, something that you've already been through and you can draw from those experiences and say, well, this is all very confusing, this money lending and borrowing and not lending, but borrowing.
Yeah.
And you know, the different entitlements that are out there for you to be able to borrow money and set yourself up better it's worth that grind. It really is worth that grind and time and effort.
Reminds me of the saying, like, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah,
you know?
that's right.
But many people are doing it and it can be done, but you got to put the time and effort into sort of learning it, or at least getting the knowledge to a certain level of knowing who to engage, or if you're going to engage someone or do it yourself. Many have done it themselves and can. But it's that, you know, if it was easy, everyone would do it. But
yeah, definitely.
You know, you got to take action and do something, I guess.
Yeah, I think so for sure. And that's probably the greatest thing to sort of end on is that, you know, you can sit there and think about it for 20 years, or you can.
Well, we saw the results over 10 years, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
yeah.
And if we ran those numbers for another 5 or 10 years on that example, it would probably be, you know, because the beauty of compounding growth, I mean, if there's a final tip, I guess, learn and understand compound growth, because I think that's the thing that really triggered the light bulb for me and said, how to, I got to get more. But
make it work for you.
100%.
Yeah.
So, well, Mark, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I'm sure there's plenty of value bombs in there. Any final words?
No, look, thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was a different conversation for me to be having that I usually have when people ask me to come onto a podcast. So I appreciate it very much, and I've actually learned a lot. So,
yeah, awesome.
If I've learned something, then I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that can take something away from it as well. So thank you.
Excellent. And once again, thanks for coming on board.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.